Alrighty, let's talk about our old pal, Uncle Aristotle, who was trucking around ancient Athens long time ago. I think he was born in somewhere around 380, maybe 385 BC. Died somewhere around 320. Hopefully, I'm somewhere in the neighborhood on those dates. It doesn't matter. He lived a long time ago, over 2,000 years ago. He studied under Plato at Plato's Academy for 20 years, and Plato was the student of Socrates. So among Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, we're talking about three major influences in Western philosophy. And it's hard to overstate the impact of Aristotle's ideas, not just on philosophy, but on civilization itself. It's Aristotle who gives us the first system of formal logic, categorical logic. It's Aristotle who gives us the first and maybe the definitive description of virtue ethics. And to understand how Aristotle develops his ethics, we first have to understand a little bit about Aristotle's metaphysics and Aristotle's epistemology. In other words, we have to understand a little bit about how Aristotle thought reality was organized, what kinds of things exist and how they exist. That's metaphysics. And we have to understand a little bit about how Aristotle believed we come to have knowledge about the things that exist and about reality. That's epistemology. To understand Aristotle's metaphysics and epistemology, we're going to think in terms of causes. Causes are the tool that Aristotle uses to make sense of things that exist. Okay, so Aristotle begins with the assumption that why something is the way that it is due to causes. And for Aristotle, there are four causes of everything that exists. One of those causes is a material cause. And all that means is things that exist are made of something. Right? So you take, like, for example, this bottle of hot sauce. It's made of something. It's made of glass. And so we'd say, well, glass is the material cause of this bottle. Here's this thing that it exists. Why does it exist as it does? It exists as it does in part because of what it's made from. It's made from glass. It also exists as it does because that glass is structured in a very particular way. And we could describe it at a really superficial level by saying, well, it's kind of rounded in shape and it's closed at the bottom, it's closed on the sides, but it's open at the top. And that's the formal cause. Somebody took this glass and they deliberately arranged all of those molecules in a particular way to form this bottle as it is. And that person or that thing who did that arranging of the glass particles, that's the efficient cause of this bottle. The efficient cause is who or what created the thing that we're looking at to be structured in the way that it is, right? So we have a material cause, something that whatever the thing is made of. We have a formal cause, how that material is arranged, and we have an efficient cause, who or what arranged this material in the shape that it is. And then finally, and this is the important one, we have a final cause, what Aristotle would call a telos. And the final cause is what the thing is for. And what the thing is for is going to be deduced from how the thing, what the thing is, what it's made of, and how what it's made of is arranged. So when we look at this glass bottle, we can say, well, just based on what I'm observing about the material it's made from and how the material is arranged, I can see that this is good for holding things. It's good for holding liquids, right? Because the bottom and the sides are closed and impermeable, but the top is open, so I can pour things in it, like powders or liquids. And that's what this is for, right? So this is sort of reminiscent of natural law theory's idea of purpose, except for Aristotle, he's not thinking in terms of a divine mind that created all of the things that exist in a particular order for a particular reason. Aristotle's thinking more about how you can examine the things that exist in reality and deduce from their properties what their purpose is or what they're for. Okay? So for Aristotle, everything that exists has a telos. It has a design or a purpose. It has something it's good for. This is good for holding liquids and powders. It is not good for nailing nails into boards. It's not good for transporting us to the grocery store. Those are not things this is for. And we can deduce that simply by examining the nature of the bottle itself. When something actualizes its telos, in other words, when something actualizes its purpose that's inherent in its design, Aristotle says that thing is flourishing when it does it. It's being the best it can be as the thing that it is. And when something's being the best that it can be as the thing that it is, it's flourishing. Aristotle says. It is living the good life. Okay, so a really common example that we might offer to illustrate Aristotle's idea of telos and flourishing is to think about an acorn and an oak tree. And we think to ourselves, well, how does an acorn become a flourishing oak tree? And we'd start to say things like, well, given the nature of an acorn and given the nature of an oak tree, we're going to want to plant that acorn in some soil. And we're going to want to make sure that soil has water. And we're going to want to make sure that as that acorn starts to sprout, that it gets sunlight. But, and this is the important point, we want to make sure that that soil doesn't have too many nutrients in it. It can't have too little and it can't have too much. Otherwise, in either condition, the acorn won't flourish. It'll languish. Similarly, we don't want the soil to be too moist. We don't want it to be too dry either. We want it to kind of be just right, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And we want to make sure that that acorn, that sprouting acorn, or that budding oak tree has enough sunlight, but not too much and not too little, right? So there's a way for that acorn to flourish given the thing that it is that's very unique to the causes of that acorn being what they are. And the best acorn cannot become a redwood tree. The best acorn cannot become a salmon. Right? There's an inherent potential within the acorn to become a certain type of thing, an oak tree. And in order for that acorn to become the best oak tree that it can, it has to be in the right circumstances. Okay? So now Aristotle's going to extend this thinking about the nature of things as they exist and their potentials and their flourishing. And he's going to apply this to people, right? And so now the question for us is, okay, but how do I figure out what the good life is for human beings and how to achieve it? In other words, how do I figure out what it looks like when a human being is flourishing? What does it mean to flourish as a human being? I'm not an acorn. So if I try to live like an acorn, I'm not going to flourish because that's not the kind of thing that I am. And so Aristotle would say, okay, so the first thing you have to do is you have to take account of how the reality in which you exist is structured. In other words, what Aristotle would say is discover the organizational structure or the patterns of the world by using the best tools available to you. Go out, experience things, perceive things, study things, and use your capacity for reason, rationality, and logic to understand the nature of things and what kinds of things cause them to flourish. In other words, for Aristotle, before you can determine what the right thing to do is and what the right ways to live are, you have to know what the field is like. And what Aristotle means by that is you have to understand the totality of reality. The more that you know about the world that you live in and the cosmos and how these things are structured and how things seem to work and what conditions cause things to flourish or languish, until you understand those things, you don't know how to act. So for Aristotle, we always begin by studying the environment that we're in, sort of like the natural law theorist, to determine how things seem to work.